Other news at this hour, Parliament says Chief Justice Raymond Zondo's criticism of the legislature undermines the principle of separation of powers. Justice Zondo chaired the State Capture Commission, has accused Parliament of failing to implement some of the inquiry's recommendations. He was addressing a seminar at the Human Sciences Research Council in Pretoria yesterday. In his remarks, the Chief Justice says that even if another episode of state capture were to take place, Parliament would not be able to stop it. Justice Zondo has called for the establishment of a permanent state capture commission. So on this, we're going to be joined via Zoom by Rudie Heyneke from the organization Undoing Tax Abuse. Rudie, good afternoon. Thank you for your time with us here on the SABC.
Good afternoon, Liesl. Thank you very much.
Right, so sentiments on and remarks and critiques of parliamentary's oversight of government institutions have now come into the spotlight. In your opinion, what's been the role of Parliament in state capture?
Well, I think if we look back and look at the recommendations and the findings of Chief Justice Zondo, it is clear that Parliament didn't, play their part in the previous administration. There was a lack of oversight. There's a lack of action. We have seen that the executive, ignoring portfolio committee meetings. And all of that, played a part in the lack of oversight and, making recommendations and keeping the executive to account.
Chair, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo also put it to Parliament to ensure that perhaps finding of the state capture inquiry should be fully implemented. At this point, I wonder, do you think Parliament has a bigger role to play in this? Perhaps we're talking to the funding of the inquiry. A lot of money was spent. It seems that there's still little outcomes. How would you weigh in on those sentiments reflected?
Well, first of all, if we look at the money spent on the Commission, if I can touch on that first, a lot of people say that, we've spent R1 billion and we haven't seen anything. If we measure that up against, what was lost in state capture, the predictions are R100 billion and more. So I think it was a small price to pay for this huge amount of information and intelligence and evidence that was gathered by the investigators of the Commission. One must keep in mind that what we saw in the public domain and that was presented to the public is only about 10% of all information that was gathered, by the investigators. And on that, I think it is important, because the taxpayer foot that bill, that information, the rest of the information that's still out there or with the Commission, that, we must know exactly who's the custodian of that information, and it must be accessible. We as the taxpayers paid for that information, and we need to know what they have and how we can utilize it going forward.
Rudie, since the lack of implementation upon the handing over the final installments of the state capture report is alarming at this point as we're speaking, elections are also looming. What are your concerns as we edge closer?
I think that, I tend to agree with what the Chief Justice said yesterday. There's a lack of progress and a lack of compliance by Parliament.